What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell, and in today's video we're going to be covering one of the most aggressive options that the e4 player has available, and that's against e5. We're playing the Evans Gambit. We're starting off with knight f3 and actually going into an Italian gambit. Now against bishop c5, we're not going to be playing a quiet option such as c3, d3, or even castling kingside. Obviously, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of these moves, but instead we're going to be playing this option of b4, which at first sight may just seem like a blunder, right? I mean, why on earth are we just giving up a pawn? But guys, this is what starts off the Evans Gambit. And the whole idea is that if you take back with the bishop or with the knight, we're able to play c3 with tempo, right? Kicking your piece back and also supporting this d4 push, gaining a space advantage in the center, gaining an advantage in development, and also getting attacking chances out of it. Now look, we are attacking this bishop on c5, and the main option here is bishop takes b4, but we're first going to be covering what other options you may be running into. By the way, down in the description below, I left 3 PGNs so that you can memorize the theory, and that's actually what I recommend for y'all really trying to take off with the system. It is going to take some time because there's a ton here, but guys, once you get the system down, you're going to be on your way to winning a lot more ball games. We're attacking this bishop on c5 again. Bishop takes b4 is the main move. But what other options does black have? Well, one of them is just taking with the knight, right? I mean, if we see a move like knight takes b4, again, we're playing this move c3, kicking that knight back, and then playing d4, attacking that bishop on c5, and also putting pressure on e5 as well. If you want to take on d4, we'll simply capture back. And now against bishop b4 with check, we can now continue with a move like knight bd2. This is my favorite option. It keeps things complicated, and if black ever wants to take on d2, we're going to have the bishop pair, which is big in an open game like this. If you play a move here like d6, which is very popular in online chess, we can just continue with this move of queen b3, right? Very common idea in the Evans Gambit. Our bishop's already on c4. Queen b3 is often a nice idea, putting a ton of pressure on the weakest pawn in chess. f7 and f2 are the weakest pawns in chess because only the king defends them. Notice here, black has to find some kind of way to defend that pawn. And if you play a move like bishop takes d2, again, we're totally okay with going out the bishop pair. And the moment that you defend this pawn on f7, we're just going to continue developing. I mean, talk about an advantage in piece activity and development. Right now, we are already castled. We have 3 minor pieces in the game, and this queen on b3 is also very active. Black, on the other hand, only has 2. They can play a move here such as knight f6. By the way, queen takes e4 simply runs into rook e1, and we're going to win a queen. And here, again, we're going to play rook e1 anyways. Continue now with e5, trying to break the center open. I'm taking white here any day of the week. So going back to this move of knight bd2, I mean, look, if you see something like d6, you can always play queen b3 and just continue developing your pieces. You're going to be in business. What happens here if black plays this option of bishop c3, right? At first sight, this may seem a little bit intimidating. Our rook's being attacked, as well as our pawn on d4 by not 1 minor piece, but 2. But in this case, guys, we have bishop takes f7 with check. Whole idea being, if you take back, we have queen b3. We're snatching off this bishop. We're sitting at even material, and it goes without saying that white is simply better. We have nice development, and this king is very vulnerable. So y'all, d6 leads us to a pretty easy game. Here, black plays bishop c3. We actually have bishop takes f7 check ideas. Whole idea being we have queen b3, and we pick up that minor piece. What about a move here like knight f6? Well, in this case, we can play d5, right? Trying to kick this knight around. And here, if you see something like knight a5, simply bring this bishop back to d3. Here, black castles, we're going to continue development as well. We can simply fee and shadow our bishop on that b2 square, putting some pressure on that knight on f6. Guys, white here with a very smooth and easy game going forward. And black has a lot to figure out, particularly their knight on a5 and bishop on b4 are very awkwardly placed. I mean, this bishop on b4 is obviously kind of just hanging out, kind of disconnected from the rest of the black camp. And this knight on a5 can't even move. White here are going to continue developing, always eyeing potential e5 ideas, and we're in business. So guys, going back to the original position of the Evans Gambit, when we play this move b4, if you want to take back with the knight, that's cool. Play c3, d4 expanding in the center, prepare to take back. And against bishop b4 check, play knight bd2, continue development, and really trying to go after that king on e8. What happens here if black sees this move and goes, you know what, I don't want to take the pawn at all. I'm just going to play this move of bishop b6. Well, guys, in this case, I recommend this move of a4. Notice we're actually threatening to trap this bishop on b6. If black here kind of wastes time with a move like d6, for example, we can play a5, kicking this bishop to d4, in which case we have c3. We are going to have every single square taken away from that minor piece. Here, black should really play a move like a6, in which case, okay, we play a move like c3. A lot of players like playing a5, but I like keeping that in the bank for the future. There's no rush to play a5. We can play it whenever we want. Instead, I like this move of c3, simply holding on to b4. There's a lot of different things that black can do here, but oftentimes black will play this move of d6, the most popular option in online chess. And here white can play a move like d3. All of a sudden, it seems as if we're in a Guico pianissimo type position, which is funny because it started off with the Evans Gambit. But again, y'all, very easy and simple game for white going forward. We're going to continue developing, right? Play a move like h3, castling kingside, get this bishop involved on e3 looking to trade, or even bishop g5 pinning that knight. Knight a3 is a good option, knight d2 as well, queen b3. You get the idea. We have a nice base advantage on the queen side of the board. And, okay, we're just playing chess. See all here, if you see a move like a6, okay, play a move like c3, hold down that pawn, continue with d3. If black ever wants to play a move like d5, you can always just capture off that pawn, and white there with a comfortable game going forward. If a move like a5 from black, we can always play b5 trying to kick this knight around. What about if black just sees this pawn and decides to take it, right? I mean, this may be tempting. Notice now we're going to continue with a5. Bishop d4 simply does not work for black because of c3, and we're going to be forking both the bishop and the knight. And here, if a move like bishop c5, we have c3, followed by castling kingside. I personally, in this variation, like to just castle kingside, and then play the move d4, trying to blast open that center. Here, if a move like bishop b4, notice that this is no longer a check, and therefore black can't try to pick off this pawn right away. We can now play a move like e5, d5. I mean, just kicking these knights around. Guys, go on to Elite Chess. Look at the most popular options for black. This is the position that you're going to see coming out of this line. Y'all, these pawns on d5 and e5 are absolute monsters. We have queen e2 ideas on the way against that knight. And, okay, I mean, black here is in major trouble. So y'all, going back, the sideline variations, if you see something like knight takes b4, you can always play c3 and d4. And if you see bishop b6, play a4. Looking at very aggressive a5 options, gaining space and actually threatening to trap that bishop on the spot. Now again, what is the main move? The main move is bishop captures on b4, in which, okay, we're going to continue yet again with this move of c3. And now the main line is bishop a5, but we're going to be covering 3 moves before this, including bishop c5, bishop d6, and bishop e7. All of these moves are played quite a bit, so I think it's important that we cover all of them. First off, what about this move of bishop c5? Well, in this case, I just recommend d4, right? Kicking this bishop around. Here, if a move like e takes d4, we simply capture back. And if black plays bishop b6 here, retreating that bishop, I mean, look, we got a great pawn chain right in the center of the board, wiping out half of the 5th rank, and black's not going to be able to do much about it. And here, if bishop b4 check, we actually just transposed into the line that we just covered with knight bd2. Again, white here with a great attacking game. So y'all, bishop c5 is pretty simple. Play d4, and you're going to be in business. What about this move of bishop e7? Black taking their pawn, and then going all the way back, going into the Anderson variation. And here for white, you guessed it, this move of d4, right? Again, expanding the center of the board, supported by that pawn on c3. And here black actually has a few different options. The main line is surprisingly knight a5. But if your opponent is not well acquainted with the theory, I have a really hard time believing that they're going to find a move like knight a5 here. I mean, this just looks simply losing. Here, this knight simply letting go of the centralized pawn. Knight a5 is personally one of the last moves that I would look at if I didn't know the theory here. We are going to cover what to do against knight a5, but first off, what other options will you see that are more playable? First off, d6, just trying to lock this game down, defend the pawn e5, and also taking on d4. If black takes on d4, we have queen b3, again forming a battery ram against that pawn on f7. And here black, notice what's going on. Black simply cannot defend that pawn on f7 with the queen because this bishop is in the way. And here if black defends it with a move like knight h6, I mean, we're just going to take that knight right off the board, right? So here black has to play a move like knight a5, trying to attack both our queen and our bishop, and in this case we can simply snatch off that f-pawn, play queen a4. We actually can lose the bishop, but we're going to get this knight in return. We're looking to play c takes d4, and here if black decides to take our pawn on c3, we're simply going to get our knight involved into the game. We are down a pawn here, but talk about attacking chances and a very vulnerable king on f7. For white, castling kingside is only one move away, and our rooks are going to be connected very quickly. I'm taking white here any day of the week. So y'all, if a move like e takes d4 here, we have queen b3. And notice that we played d4 first because after pawn takes and queen b3, knight h6 is not an option because of this d4 move seen on the board. All right, our bishop's able to fly in there. So we played d4 first, and then that queen b3 idea. So that bishop h6 is an option. What about this move of d6? Black just trying to lock this game up. Well, in this case, again, we're playing queen b3, right? Simply trying to attack that pawn on f7. If knight h6, we're going to take that knight off. What about this move of knight a5? Well, again, we're simply going to take off that pawn on f7 and play queen a4 and snatch off that knight. In this case, we have a queen, pawn, and knight all coming down on this pawn on e5. Black here in some major trouble if they're not careful. So y'all, hopefully you're seeing by this point, I mean, the Evans Gambit has a lot of similar ideas in so many lines and variations, right? I mean, we've already seen queen b3 a handful of times. I think the one move here, in which case we kind of got to change the game plan, is the main line of knight a5, right? Simply attacking our bishop on c4. By the way, we can take this pawn on e5, but I don't think that it leads to anything overwhelming for white, right? In this case, black can actually just take off the bishop and continue with d5, trying to break open the center of the board. If we take, the queen's going to come into the game, attacking both of our knight and our pawn on g2. Thankfully, we can save both with this move of knight e3, followed by castling kingside. But after knight f6, I mean, okay, we have a game of chess going ahead. I would probably put this position about dead even, but white here, really not with any attacking chances at all. In fact, you could argue that black may be the one who is up a little bit in development with castling kingside only one move away. I don't really like this position for white too much. So again, knight takes e5 is playable. The whole idea being, if you take on c4, we're simply going to capture back with the knight. But I more side with this move of bishop e2. I mean, this really keeps things interesting, right? We're putting some pressure on e5 with both the pawn on d4 and our knight. And here black plays a move like e takes d4. We can actually capture back with the queen, right? Putting some pressure on g7. Surprisingly, the computer actually recommends black playing this idea of d6, giving up this pawn, and then playing bishop f6, kicking our queen to g3. But guys, how often are you going to see a move like d6? Probably not very often. It's more likely that you're going to see a move here like knight f6, in which case we have e5. At first sight, this may seem very scary for black to have to deal with. This knight, obviously, with nowhere to go. But black does have this idea of knight c6, right? Attacking our queen on d4. And here, if we play something like queen h4, this knight's able to centralize. Our queen is now attacked. But okay, as white, we play a move like queen g3, attacking the pawn on g7. If a move like castling kingside, we always have bishop h6 ideas. And if a move like g6, we can always castle kingside. A lot of attacking ideas going forward. I mean, c4 attacking that knight, knight c3. We can always get our bishop involved. And okay, we have a middle game with a lot of inequalities, which is exactly what we want coming out of the Evans. So y'all, that covers this move of bishop e7, in which case we're going to play d4 and then the move of queen b3, so that knight h6 doesn't work, as we can simply snatch that knight off. A very fun line there for white. What about this move of bishop d6 with the stoneware variation? This is somewhat of a strange move, right? And I'm not going to be spending too much time on this. I guess the reasoning is that if a move like bishop c5, we have d4, kicking that bishop around, and if we move like bishop e7, as we saw, this queen gets locked up, and moves like queen e7 simply aren't possible, trying to hang on to that pawn if needed. That being said, bishop d6 is very awkward, right? I mean, black here, very awkward game. I mean, this bishop can't come into the game unless you want to try to fianchetto it to b7, in which case, okay, what's that bishop even doing, at least in the near future? Very awkward move. Guys, my recommendation is actually not to try to checkmate this king right away. Notice, if we do play a move like queen b3, a move like queen e7 holds on to things very easily. Instead, I recommend just expanding in the center of the board, and then from this point, simply developing. Black is going to have an awkward game and a lot of problems to deal with. We play this move d4. What can black do here? Well, first off, let's discover this move e takes d4. We actually have a couple of different options here. I personally side with castling kingside, and that is because I like this bishop on d6 being here. What on earth am I talking about? And how on earth is this any different than taking on d4? Well, notice, if we go a move back, if we do take this pawn on d4, all of a sudden bishop b4 check ideas are available. And again, knight bd2 transposes into the variation that we've covered earlier. But all of a sudden, we've kind of saved black from having this very awkward bishop, right? I mean, what's the difference? If you play bishop c5 and then bishop b4, or bishop d6 followed by bishop b4, there's not much of a difference. Guys, going back to this e takes d4 move, why not castle first and then look to take on d4 so that this bishop is very awkward? And look, I mean, if black here plays something like d takes c3, we can always capture back with the knight. Black is ahead 2 points of material, but talk about an advantage in development and an awkward game for black. I mean, they only have 2 pieces developed at the moment. We have 3, and our king is castled. Very quick and easy development on the way. We're gonna get our rooks involved. We always have e5 ideas in the air. Guys, black is not far from having to throw in the towel. See, y'all, if a move like e takes d4, I like castling kingside instead of taking on d4 right away, because I don't like giving black that option of bishop b4 with check. What about this move of knight f6? What happens if black goes, look, I'm just going to keep this pawn on e5 and simply try to get my king 1 move closer to castling kingside? Well, in that case, okay, we're going to castle. If they want to castle, we'll play a move like rook e1, trying to defend that pawn on e4. And okay, I mean, we have a solid game here. If you ever want to take on d4, we'll simply capture back with the c-pawn. We're going to continue developing our pieces, and we're just playing chess. Now, y'all, again, I just covered this move of castling kingside, and if black just kind of reciprocates us with the same thing, we can play rook e1, holding onto that pawn. Some of you are probably wondering, okay, wait, what happens if black just takes the pawn off right now? Guys, this is a huge mistake. Black has to castle first. In this case, we're simply going to take on e5, and if a move like knight takes e5 is played, which, by the way, is the computer recommendation, we can now continue with rook e1. And y'all, there is so much hanging here in the center of the board. Our rook directly aimed towards the opponent's king. We are down 2 points of material, but we're simply threatening to win an entire piece. If this knight runs away somewhere, like f6, we're simply going to capture off that knight on e5. And here, if a move like knight takes c4, we have rook captures with check, followed by snatching off that knight. Here, white up 1 point in material, and with a 1 game. So guys, that covers 3 of the sideline variations: bishop c5, bishop d6, and bishop e7. Against all of these, we're going to continue with d4, look to castle kingside, and have queen b3 ideas in the air. Very fun chess for white. Now, what about the main line? The main line is bishop a5, simply dropping this bishop back and keeping an eye on this king, while also not getting kicked around. And really, this move makes a lot of sense, right? If you play bishop c5, we kick that bishop around. If you play bishop d6, well, you have a bishop on d6. And if you play bishop e7, this queen is not really able to get into the game. And if you play bishop f8, which we didn't even cover, I mean, what on earth are you doing, right? So, okay, this move bishop a5 does make sense. In this case, we're still going to continue with this move of d4, expanding in the center of the board. We're going to be covering what to do against e captures on d4. But first off, what happens if black tries to lock this game up with this move of d6? I do not recommend this move for black, and I think that things can go south very quickly if they're not careful. We're going to play this move of queen b3, right? Putting some pressure on f7, and notice knight a5 ideas are not available because the bishop is sitting there. So we're attacking that pawn. Knight h6 again, not going to work. And now black with a few different ideas. Really 2 options with queen e7 and queen d7. Queen e7 actually seems like the more natural move, right? Giving this bishop some development. But that being said, this queen on e7 can give black some major issues. We're going to play d5, right? And this may seem a little bit surprising, like why are we trying to lock up the center of the board when we have such an edge in development and we're trying to put pressure on black? Well, notice if black here plays a move like knight b8 or knight d8, we don't really care. We're going to have queen a4 check, simply attacking that king, and we're going to snatch off this minor piece the very next move. White there, up material, and black's running out of hope. So y'all, with this move of d5, knight b8 doesn't work, knight d8 doesn't work. What does work is the surprising option of knight d4. Again, this bishop on a5, really keeping an eye on this king, so we can't simply win this knight. We can actually take this knight on d4, but notice here, we do got to be a little bit careful. Castling kingside is actually not a bad option here for white at all. In fact, if I was playing here as white in an over-the-board tournament game, I might just go with castling kingside as a safe option, and we're still going to have aggressive and attacking chess going forward. Notice queen a4 here may be tempting, but we can fall into trouble very quickly. If a move like bishop d7, we can actually take on a5 if you plug this into a computer program, because this king is still on e8. But here, if a move like king d8, we actually can't take this bishop, because all of a sudden this queen's going to come in on e4, and king d1 ideas trying to play rook e1, pinning the queen to the king on e8 don't work because, well, the king's not on e8, right? The king's on d8. So here, if we play a move like king d1 or even king f1, in either case, d3 is going to be played. In this case, queen e2 check followed by queen e1 checkmate is the threat. And here, if we stop it with a move like bishop e3, this queen simply slides over. Black here on material, and almost a -2 advantage. So y'all, if you see this move of queen e7, simply play d5, and if black brings this knight back to b8 or d8, you can play queen a4 check, and if the knight comes to d4, simply snatch that knight off, castle kingside, and reinstate the threat of queen a4 check, winning off that minor piece. Now, y'all, what about this move of queen d7? Well, guys, what on earth is black doing? Well, notice here this bishop is not really able to get out, right? I mean, this is not really the move that you usually want to play in chess because the bishop can't get out. And if the bishop can't get out, the rook can't get out. And if the rook can't get out, your queen side's going to be very underdeveloped. That being said, d5 ideas here just don't hold any punch. They just don't, right? I mean, if a move like d5, knight e7, queen a4 doesn't do anything. In fact, if we do play queen a4, this queen's simply going to be eyeing that square, and we're going to lose a queen. So in this case, I recommend continuing with this move of castling kingside, right? Just continuing to develop. If black here plays a move like bishop e6, we can continue with bishop b5, trying to pin this knight on c6. Black here actually has to be very careful. There is one move that gives black a slight advantage, but anything else, and white's going to be better every single time. Notice here, we're threatening d5. And if we play d5, this knight is going to be pinned not just to the queen, but also to the king on e8. Here, black has to play this idea of a6. And against this move, bishop a4, again, we're reinstating the threat of d5. And if you take on d4, that doesn't really solve anything because we're still going to be threatening d5 and move later. Here, black needs to play this idea of bishop a7, a6, bishop a7, trying to play b5. And the whole idea here is that if we play d5, b5 is an option. If we take on c6, black can't take this bishop because we have c takes on d7 with check. But black can take on c6. We are up a point material, but look, our bishop on a4 is actually trapped. That being said, guys, it's going to be very hard for black to find this idea, especially in over-the-board quicker games or in online chess. So again, y'all, very hard line for black to find there. But if you're playing a game and you're a little bit worried about that, or an over-the-board tournament game, and you don't want to allow black that option, you can always just take on c6, right? Take on c6. Obviously, you're attacking the queen, but black's going to capture you off right now. Play a move like knight bd2. And okay, from this point, we're just playing chess. We have a nice solid center. We're putting some pressure on e5. We have potential ideas, such as bishop a3 even, really trying to take control of that long diagonal, potentially, if things open up. Here, white, with a solid game going forward. So, y'all, that covers this move of d6, right? Black here trying to defend the pawn on e5, in which case we have queen b3, followed by d5, and white there with a lot of quick wins if black is not careful. What about this move of e takes d4? Now, this is going down the main line. Actually, the Pierce defense, in this case, we're going to castle kingside, and now black actually has three main options, and we're going to be going over every single one. First off, what happens if black just takes the pawn on c3? And we're also going to be covering moves such as knight f6 and knight e7. Let's first take a look at d captures on c3. What do we do here? Well, yet again, we're playing queen b3, right? Common idea. We see this move all the time in the Evans Gambit, attacking that pawn on f7. And here, if a move like queen e7, we always have knight takes c3, followed by bishop a3 ideas, really locking down and pouncing down on that queen. So queen f6 here is the main line for black. Against this, we're going to continue with e5. The idea here, guys, is that if black tries to take off that pawn, we simply have rook e1, right? Black is ahead 4 points in material, but they're not going to be ahead in material very long. This knight is pinned to the king on e8, and here black tries to save it with a move like d6. We're going to continue with bishop g5, attacking this queen. If a move like queen f5, still trying to hold everything together, we're just going to continue to play aggressive and attacking chess. In this case, we can actually just trade off on e5 and then play queen b5 with check. And notice we're checking the king, we're attacking the bishop, and we're attacking the pawn on e5 with two major pieces. Here, black with a move like bishop d7, for example, we play rook captures on e5 with check. And y'all, this game is nearly over. So y'all, again, against queen f6, against queen b3, trying to threaten that pawn on f7, we're going to play e5, and if knight takes e5, we have rook e1, pinning that knight, and there's simply too much hanging for black there to hang on in that game with many chances. So again, y'all, against this move of queen f6, we're going to play e5, whole idea being if knight captures on e5, we have rook e1. I actually recommend that you memorize these lines and variations. In fact, from this point in the video to the end, I suggest that maybe you watch this video through a few times and really try to get the concepts and ideas. And again, look at those PGNs and play through those dozens and dozens of times. You're going to get the hang of it, and you're going to win a lot of games just by doing so. So we're attacking that queen on f6. Knight takes e5 is simply a trap that black can fall into. What about this move of queen g6? Here, black's still going with one of the main lines. Well, in this case, okay, we're just going to take back on c3 with the knight. Talk about an active minor piece ready to jump in on d5 at a moment's notice. And if black ever wants to take on c3, okay, we'll simply just capture back. Here we can play a move like bishop a3, looking to pounce down on that knight on e7. And here black plays a move like castling kingside. We're going to continue with rook a d1. We have not checkmated this king at move 13, and there's probably a good chance we're not going to win this game by move 20 or 25 in terms of checkmating that king. But that being said, I mean, y'all, talk about a hard position for black to navigate. I mean, just looking at this from the black perspective, right now the king is castled, but this knight on e7 can't even move without giving up the exchange. We have this bishop on c4 pouncing down on f7, a rook on d1, and a pawn on e5, not even allowing d6 or d5 ideas from this pawn. This queen and knight are also active. There's just so much going on here. It's going to be hard for black to find any way through this. There was actually a grandmaster game played by Adolf Anderson, in which case he was playing white here. His opponent playing this move of rook e8, in which case we see Anderson continue with rook fe1. And against a6, again, notice here, black's just trying to make moves that look okay. Here we have this idea of bishop d3, right? Attacking the queen. And here his opponent is black continue with queen h5. And now we see Anderson, another brilliant idea, rook e4. I mean, guys, this is just textbook Evans Gambit type chess. Playing rook e4, we're actually threatening to trap the queen with rook h4. Here black stops this with knight g6. Whole idea being, obviously, if you play rook h4, we're just going to lose our rook, but we can now play g4, forcing this queen to a square like h3, in which case we have bishop f1, and if it ever goes to h6, we have bishop c1. This is what was played in the game, and this is where the game ended. So here black takes on c3, we have queen b3 ideas, and against queen f6, we're going to break this game open with e5, and after that, continue with knight takes c3, continue to develop, and put pressure on the black camp. In a lot of these cases, it's just going to be hard for black to hold on. What other options does black have? Well, as mentioned, there's knight f6 and knight e7. Let's first cover this move of knight f6. This is one of those other lines / variations that you have to memorize. This is the Anderson defense, and in this case, we're going to play e5, right? Attacking this knight on f6. The main line here is actually this move of d5. Any other move here, and white simply has a big edge, and in this case, we're going to take on f6, capture on g7, threaten to make a second queen. And the moment that this rook moves, we're going to continue with bishop g5, pouncing down on that queen. Guys, there's so much going on in this position. I mean, we have a pawn on the 7th rank at move 11. Think about that. It's move 11. This is textbook theory for the Evans Gambit. And we have a pawn on the 7th rank, right? One move away from promotion, and we're attacking squares like f8 and h8. This queen's attacked. By the way, if I move here like queen d5 from black, we have rook e1 with check, followed by knight d2, eyeing squares, specifically the square of e4. There's so much going on here from a black perspective. I mean, black as well. Two very advanced pawns on c4 and d4, really trying to wipe out half of the 3rd rank. This queen's ready to come in. Here, black's going to try to play something like bishop e6 and castling queenside. This bishop is also active, but also a little bit misplaced potentially by attacking that pawn on c3. This rook is looking to capture off on g7 in just one move, depending on how this game goes. I mean, there's so much going on. You may see this move of f6. This has actually been played quite a bit in online chess, but against this, again, guys, we got to memorize these lines and ideas. We had this move of knight captures on d4. Again, what on earth is going on? Well, it turns out if knight takes d4, we actually have queen h5 with check, and white there with great attacking chances. And here, if black even tries to take off a full piece, we still play the move of queen h5. Notice here, king e7 is actually the main line for black, in which case we take on c6 and then play rook d1. And there, white with overall +1 advantage. That being said, I mean, the king's on e7, black there has to be very careful. On the other hand, white's down a lot of material, so it really depends. I mean, would you rather be down material, but be really trying to hunt down that king on e7, or would you rather be up in material, but hanging on for dear life? I personally would probably rather have white there. What about this move of king d7? Well, guys, this may seem a little bit safer. I mean, who in the right mind would ever play king e7 and allow another check? But guys, in this case, king d7 is played, and we now have queen f7, right? Just attacking this king. Here, if a move like queen e7, for example, we simply capture off that rook, and now this pawn is really a threat to become a second queen. And here, if a move like knight e7, we have rook d1. Y'all, this king is in trouble. And y'all, this game can wrap up in a few moves. So y'all, knight f6 in the Pierce defense, absolutely crazy line. e5, d5, taking on f6, taking on g7, bishop g5, rook e1, knight bd2 ideas. If f6 is played from black, we have knight takes d4. There's so much going on there. It's really just a fascinating line, right? I mean, how many of us are going to reach that position? but I mean, just talk about fascinating opening chess. What other options does black have? Well, I mean, it doesn't surprise that if black has studied this, they might be scared of this whole e5, e takes f6, f takes g7 idea. So here black may play the move of knight g e7, right? I mean, why not just play this knight here? Just really get rid of this whole e5 idea and only be one move away from castling kingside. Well, in this case, we're going to actually play knight g5. Again, crazy chess attacking the pawn on f7. It turns out that the most popular option in online chess, played almost 4,000 times, is castling kingside. But y'all, this is a devastating mistake for black because we now have queen h5, one of the many traps in the Evans Gambit. We're simply threatening to win this game in one move, and here if black plays h6, stopping it, we have knight captures on f7. If you want to move the queen, we have ideas such as knight takes h6 with check, actually a double check against that king, and that game's going to be over in just a couple moves. And if rook captures on f7, we have bishop takes f7 with check. Here, if a move like king h8, we have bishop captures on h6, and that game's nearly over. If king h7, we can now just continue by capturing off this pawn. Here, white up 2 points in material, while also keeping an eye on this bishop on a5. So if a move like knight takes d4, we can always snatch off that bishop. And there, if black wants to take on d4 and play knight c2 and win this rook, okay, we play bishop b2, and we get 2 pieces for a rook and a pawn. I take that anytime, especially in a position like this. Here, white is completely crushing. So against this key move 8, knight g5 idea, really putting a ton of pressure on f7, castling kingside is absolutely deadly for black, right? Because it simply runs into queen h5. We continue to put the pressure on f7, but on top of that, we're threatening a mate in 1, and black simply cannot stop both. On top of that, knight e5 here may seem like a good try from black, but in this case, we're actually just going to take on f7, right? Notice here, this queen has nowhere to go, so black really has no choice but to take on f7 a couple times, and against that, we can now play queen h5 with check, snatch off that bishop on a5. Here, white is down a pawn in material, but we're looking to capture on d4, and here, if black is really desperate to hang on to their one pawn advantage, and they take on c3, okay, we take back with the queen, bishop b2, one move away, and let's just say this king yet again is in some major trouble. So y'all, all that to say, we play this move of knight g5 against knight e7, castling kingside runs into queen h5, knight e5 runs into knight takes f7. The main line here for black is d5, right? Just going, look, I am just going to cut this bishop off from attacking on f7. But in this case, we have another crazy idea, and that is taking on f7 with this knight, right? Attacking the queen, attacking the rook. Black really just has to take this knight off. And in that case, we simply take on d5. Now, some of you are probably wondering, okay, wait, what is all the hype? We just gave up a piece, and we're now taking on d5. I mean, what happens here if black just takes off another pawn, right? Now they're up 4 points of material. Well, now we have this move of queen f3 with check, right? Attacking the king and attacking this knight. And here, if a move like queen f6, we're going to play bishop takes d5 with check, with bishop a3 check ideas in the air if the king goes back to f8. Black there in major trouble. And here, if black plays the move of king e6, they have held on to their knight on d5, but they have a king on e6, right? I mean, we just played this move of rook e5 with check. If you play king d6, we have a mate in 1, a king d7, a mate in 1, a move like knight e5, we have bishop f4. There's simply way too much pressure on black in this position. I mean, this game is simply resignable, white with the win coming out of the Evans. So y'all, black here having to play great chess, right? Play d5, take on f7. In this case, not even taking that pawn, but instead playing knight e5. And in this case, we're still going to continue with aggressive chess. However, at first sight, we're going to play this move of bishop b3. Now, this may seem very quiet, and it may seem as if, okay, we're down 3 points of material. How on earth could we ever play a move like this? It actually may seem as if black is the one that has an edge in development. But guys, this bishop on b3 is an absolute monster, and this king on f7 is very awkwardly placed, right? We're looking at ideas like d6 with check, and here if black tries something like just blocking off that square, we have bishop a3, right? Attacking that queen. If you play c5, we're simply able to take with en passant and a check, and okay, we're just going to win that queen and move later. And here if a move like queen g6, we have d6 with check. This knight is going to fall off, and yet again, great rewards for the Evans Gambit player. Thank you guys for watching today's video, and special thanks to everyone who has become a patron. My goal is to make this chess thing go full time, and y'all are helping me create better chess content and drop it more often. If you'd like to check out my entire Chess Gambits playlist, click that playlist to the left. If you'd like to learn more on the theory behind the Smith-Morra Gambit, an option against the Sicilian defense, click that video to the right. Leave a comment down below to let me know other videos I'd like to see covered on this channel, and as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace. Peace.